Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. My guest today is Dr. Dan Nadeau. I met him at a wonderful conference that I've been attending almost every year called the Plantrition Project. And he's going to talk to you about how you can improve your brain health, improve your metabolism, even reverse diabetes using colorful fruits and vegetables. Please welcome him to the show. It's nice to see you again,
Chef
Dr.
AJ, it
Nadeau.
is so exciting to be here with you today. I just watch your show every chance I get, and I just love it, all the great information you're providing. And, I must say, I picked up your book at the last Plantrition conference. You were kind enough to sign it for me right there. Love and Kale, that's proof that it was you. But I must say, I read through it, and I must say, you are right about helping people lose weight. I remember when I'm actually an endocrinologist. I'm from Maine originally. We'll get back to Maine in a bit, but I trained at Tufts. I actually did it, but before I went to medical school, I did a master's in nutrition at Tufts. The story starts back in Maine when I was in high school. I actually opened a natural food store called Nadeau's Natural Foods. And it was basically trying to provide a service to the community that otherwise wasn't available to the people there. Trying to provide, back then, it seemed like in the supermarkets, there just weren't the whole grains and the healthy things necessarily available. So it seemed like an opportune time back then. Misho Kushi and his gang had opened Air One down in uh, Brookline in Boston, Cambridge, and they actually were able to ship. They didn't ship all the way to my hometown because was way up in the northern tip of Maine called Fort Kent, Maine. But they would drop ship to Coles Express in Bangor, Maine, and then the Coles Express would take it the rest of the 4 hours up to where I lived. And so I was able to provide, whole foods. We actually had a stone mill. We sold celestial seasoning teas. We tried to promote books. I sold a lot of books, everything from, Adele Davis to the of course the macrobiotic books, Sugar Blues. We had all the raw food books, and I just read every left-wing nutrition book you could possibly think of back then, sitting in front of the little natural food store, and just became like, kind of the local expert on healthy eating. And it was quite an event back then. I remember I started reading the books. We always had a very big, and I really so much loved your story that you told about your health journey, which was truly fascinating, very bold, very honest, and very powerful, and very true, I would say. That you go through in this book right here. Um, and I remember we used to always have a very big dinner on Sunday, and every Sunday night I would have a headache. I felt terrible. And then one day I said, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to have broccoli for lunch. So I just had broccoli for lunch that day. And I must say, I felt great. It's like no headache. I've had great energy. I went skiing. I felt good. It was quite a remarkable thing just to have plant-based foods. And then from there, I went on and learned more. So after I had had that natural food store, actually, after college, which was I went to my hometown university, I traveled around the world with a backpack, and that was a very eye-opening experience. And on those travels, my goal was to find other natural food stores and also find vegetarian restaurants and also to meet people who were plant-based. And I must say that they were such wonderful people that I met around the world who were plant-based people. And So friendly, so inviting, and so willing to help. Uh, you know, a person traveling around the world with a backpack. So it was a great experience. And then after that, I went to Tufts. I did a master's degree in nutrition. I felt I had rather radical ideas, and I thought, well, I should get some credentials before I do anything else, some credentials in nutrition. So I did a master's degree at Tufts. And I must say, I found that the ideas were not so radical, that in fact, eating whole foods and eating healthy foods like I had read about really was kind of the guide to avoiding diabetes, to avoiding obesity, to avoiding just helping people feel so much better. And having met like lipidologists and so on, it was very influential to me. And certainly diet, is a very powerful tool. So after the master's degree, then I was able to get into Tufts Medical School, and then did that training, and then went to Vermont for endocrinology, metabolism, and nutrition. Tufts has a long history of nutrition studies and nutrition work. So I was able to focus somewhat on nutrition when I was there. And so got, quite a background. And I must say, thinking about, your book on processed, I just recall reading back when I was truly, very strict in terms of how I was eating. I really was eating very, very, very low fat. And just like you, when you move to a very low fat, whole foods, plant-based diet, losing weight is not a problem. If you avoid oil and you avoid nuts and so on, you just it was actually very challenging, even though I was eating large plates of food, to even maintain a healthy weight. I mean, it was so you are absolutely right about that. And as a fellow in endocrinology and metabolism, I was reading papers by experts on metabolism that showed when you give even very big carbohydrate loads, very little, if any, of that is converted to fat. So I do want to say that, the low carb diet people are simply dead wrong. They're simply dead wrong. And you are right about an approach to eating where you eat whole foods. If your goal is weight loss and to be healthy, whole foods, plenty of carbohydrates, like, our friend Dr. McDougall says, um, you can really do incredibly well, and you can basically have, quite a huge variety of foods and plenty of food as long as you're eating a low-fat diet. In fact, after having watched the video that you sent to me from your presentation at the McDougall program, plus having read through your book here, I decided, okay, I'm going to do a simple thing. I'm going to go ahead and just cut out, I'm going to cut out the peanut butter in the morning. And sure enough, I've been trying to get to a certain weight for quite a long time now. And in 1 week, boom, I did it. I dropped to that weight in just 7 days. It was quite a remarkable feat. And
That's
basically I have you to thank for it.
Well, I mean, I have Dr. McDougall and Dr. Esselstyn and Pritikin and all the people that went before me to thank for that. But it really does work. But people seem to either have resistance to trying it or they feel like they're going to drop dead if they don't have nuts every day. You can have flax seeds or chia seeds.
That's right. Those are very good. There's more omega-3. There's plenty of fiber and protein and such. Those are, super healthy for sure, for sure.
Dr. Nadeau, Cheryl, my friend, is watching live, and she has a really good question, if you don't mind me asking you
Sure.
while I see it. And she says, why do you think that there are so many endocrinologists who recommend the keto diet to their diabetic patients?
Well, I think it's a basic misunderstanding, as we'll talk about if we when we get to the slide presentation here, of, being afraid of carbs. There's been such a push towards protein. What I sometimes tell my patients is so many people are afraid they're going to die of protein malnutrition if they don't have a dead animal on their plate at every meal. So people are just so focused on protein, 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 when in fact it's really, if you look at studies from the Harvard School of Public Health, and what is the food that is the most associated with risk of diabetes, it is actually processed meat is number one, and number two is red meat, and then you get to, the Coca-Cola and the pure high sugar foods as risk factors for diabetes. So the saturated fat that that you consume basically causes insulin resistance, and that's what leads to diabetes. It's not the whole grains or even the bananas that are doing it. It's the saturated fat that's the problem, and all this fat coursing through just makes it so that the receptors for glucose don't work effectively. Insulin doesn't work. You get the insulin resistance, and I think I would say that physicians in general, unfortunately, really don't have much of a background in nutrition at all. Even the endocrinologists, and so many. I must say, I've gone to endocrine meetings where we'll have people who they'll go and they'll just basically have all meat on their plate. So I know what she's talking about. They're into this, very low carb, I think very dangerous approach to eating. And when I see patients who are on this approach of focusing because they have diabetes on high protein, I worry about their very high risk for heart disease because really what kills people with diabetes is heart disease. Two-thirds of people with diabetes actually die of heart disease. And so the thing to do there is to avoid saturated fat, avoid cholesterol that's in eggs, and to move to a plant-based diet to protect your heart. That's really where we want to go. So I think that even endocrinologists, unfortunately, although they do tend to be, I would say, the more yeah, socially conscious physicians out there, there's still a lot of misconceptions that they have about food and about protein, and pushing high animal food, you know, diets as opposed to healthy diets that will keep their patients healthy for the long term. So I'm glad to be an endocrinologist on your show talking about just how important it is to eat a healthy plant-based diet.
I think that's so cool that you started a health food store. That's kind of how Dr. Ella Goldhammer started when I think he was 16 years old.
Is that right? No
Yeah,
kidding.
selling sprouts. Yep.
Selling sprouts, you got to do it. I mean, it was providing a service that otherwise, and it was what was the cool thing was I met people from all walks of life. We had hippies who lived way up into the very cold forest up there. We had lawyers' wives. We had people coming from Canada coming across to find foods that they otherwise couldn't find. And it was truly a wonderful experience just meeting, people, as more than anybody. People who are into the, plant-based eating are the friendliest people you're ever going to meet. I mean, they're very conscious about food, about the environment. They're just so conscious about, uh, uh, making the world a better place. And I think that that's important to recognize.
Nice. Did you show your books yet?
Okay, so as far as books, so I did write this book. This came out in 2002, and you can see that the first author there is Jim Joseph. So he was chief of the neuroscience lab at Tufts in Boston, and we'll talk about his research when we get to the slides. He's the guy who showed improved memory and motor skills in older animals by feeding them blueberries. Um, so, and then Ann Underwood is mentioned there as well. And she worked at Newsweek magazine and had written an article on Jim's work that was published in Newsweek. And then the three of us collaborated to uh, to get this book out. And so what this book does is it basically divides food into colors. So we talk about the red foods, the yellow orange foods, the green, the blue purple foods, and the green foods, and what's in them and why they're good for you. So it's kind of broken down by colors and what makes the food that color and why they're good for you. And so it's very, I think that the first couple chapters and chapter 7 are really guides to healthy eating. The rest, it's a bit encyclopedic in terms of the data and the information that it has. Um, but it may be a little bit less accessible to certain people, but people do find it definitely, a good read. It's been influential. I mean, when this book came out, the 5-a-day people, because we had kind of demonstrated in this book, went to then suggesting 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day because we showed in this book how it is possible to get that many servings of fruits and vegetables and how good that can be for you. And so this was an exciting book to work on. And we'll basically go through the concepts of this book today. Now then the next book that I'm working on is, here's a rough copy of a potential cover for it. It's not absolutely finalized yet, but it's called The Color Cure: Nutrition to Optimize Health and Reverse Disease, the Warrior Edition. Um, and you can see basically what I'm trying to do is suggest here the creative power of fruits and vegetables. To me, Adam has kind of blown it. And now we're turning to people like you, uh, who can basically take this message of healthy eating and translate it into healthy eating for people around the world. I mean, let's face it, when it comes to nutrition ideas, I mean, they come really from the interest of women who are taking this information and passing it on to their families and passing it on to men. So we have to recognize that women are the key to making this happen. And she has a few interesting things. So she's getting that power of the fruits and vegetables transmitted to her. She's looks like a warrior. Her earring is um, reminiscent of the sun, suggesting that we recognize that all of the power that comes from fruits and vegetables is coming essentially from the sun and the energy of the sun. And then she's carrying not like a knife that you'd kill anybody with, but she's carrying a Japanese vegetable knife. And it has the tree of life on it as well. So it's basically recognizing how when we take these fruits and vegetables, we can really make a huge difference in the world. And then so this book is a bit different. So in this book, what we've done is uh, start talking about different systems. So we talk about the skin, we talk about the brain, we talk about the heart, we talk about diabetes, we talk about a weight loss plan, very similar to what you suggest. We talk about gut health, we talk about inflammation. I'm always impressed with when I've been to the Plantrition conference how there's usually somebody who said that they had lupus affecting their entire system, including their kidneys. And as a physician, you think, oh my God, well, that's incurable. I mean, they're stuck with that for life. And then they change their diets. They move to a plant-based diet, start eating more berries, more fruits, more healthy foods, and boom, the lupus goes away. I mean, it's tremendous, tremendous. And then we talk about a bit on the planet and trying to keep the world a greener place by eating more plants. And then we talked just a bit about how about feeding your dogs, um, more of a plant-based diet. So that chapter is called "Here Tofu, Here Tofu, Sit Tofu, Sit."
That's funny. I love that one.
So if you ever wanted a dog named Tofu, I mean, here's your permission to do that.
It's funny that you said that because I had a dog named Ginger. When I got my next dog, I was going to name him Tofu, but he just looked like a Sparky. So
He what? Sorry.
he looked more like a Sparky. And I
Oh,
actually do have a
Sparky.
friend. I have a
Okay.
friend whose
Okay.
dog is named Tofu. So it is a thing.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So yeah, so that's basically kind of the concept of the newer book is kind of take the first book and translate it into something that's of more interest to more people because it's more system focused. If you're having problems with your skin, then the book will emphasize, okay, well, let's get the dairy out of the diet as the first thing. Let's cut out the sugary food. Let's dramatically reduce the fat in your diet. Let's move to a plant-based, whole foods, high antioxidant diet. Maybe have a little bit of carrot juice to get those carotenoid levels higher in the skin. Let's try and get people, much healthier based on their diet by eliminating these foods that we shouldn't be eating and eating more unprocessed food, as you might say.
Nice. I can't wait to see your presentation.
Okay, great. So should we move to that now, do you think?
So that would be great. And then we can take questions afterwards if people post it in the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, let's do it here. Okay, here we go. Oops, let's see, let's go back. So yeah, the name of the talk is Vibrant Colors, Vibrant Health, Improving Metabolism, Reversing Diabetes, and Improving Brain Health with Brightly Colored Fruits and Vegetables with Chef AJ. Again, I'm very excited to be here. So I am, you see my email address there, just dnetomd@gmail.com. And then I am the co-author of the book we just mentioned, working on this upcoming book, hopefully out by January or February, called The Color Cure: Nutrition to Optimize Health and Reverse Disease, the Warrior Edition. And you can get more information or even pre-order potentially at colorcurewarrior.com. And thanks again for having me. So I do think that ideas themselves, like the one that you have of eating a whole foods, unprocessed, plant-based diet that's low in fat is a very powerful idea. Um, I think the concept we're trying to push with what I'm talking about now is trying to get more color in your diet. I think color is really an attractive idea, especially when you have kids. There is actually some data now that kids who have blueberries before they go to school will actually do better on testing if they've had blueberries for breakfast. So something for mothers to keep in mind. So we want to plant these seeds of change, um, to try and help people move towards a healthier, plant-based, and I would say colorful diet. So unfortunately, we have in America now, obesity remains rampant, diabetes is rampant, so many people eating processed food, fat, dairy, eggs, meat, foods that in some ways, often the very processed food, just really kind of look like food, but they're not really food. So we need to move back to more traditional diets. And if you look at people who have traditional diets, like if you think of like an Aboriginal Chinese person, living near a rice field, they have 80% less heart disease. They have the longest life expectancy and the lowest rates of breast, prostate, and colon cancer. We know that breast, prostate, and colon cancer are related to dairy intake. High meat diets are really causing rampant increases where regarding colon cancer, the time to start screening is much earlier than it used to be because so many younger people are getting colon cancer because their diets include so much meat and very little fiber as well. Um, we know that back in the day, Pima Indians, really back in 1922, when Elliot Jocelyn went into Arizona to look to see if the Indians had any diabetes, that's the American Indian, he found there was no diabetes in the American Indian. I've visited a camp up in Bishop, California here, where they have a museum related to the Indians, and it was surprising. I mean, they ate pine nuts, they had very simple grains that they would consume. They ate really a lot of plant-based foods. I mean, plant-based foods are easy to store and they can, keep a civilization alive, but they were eating mainly plant-based. So there was really no diabetes until we started really giving them a lot of surplus meat and cheese, fast food restaurants, and now 60, 70% of them have diabetes. People with the exact same genetic heritage living in Mexico, even recently, where they're eating corn, they're eating beans, they're eating vegetables, still no diabetes in that group. It's really when you introduce the high fat foods, the meat and the cheese, that the diabetes and the obesity just dramatically increased. And so many Americans now have either diabetes or pre-diabetes. It's just a tremendous problem and it continues to grow. And so we turn back, well, where do we go? Well, here's a quote from the book of Genesis. It says, "Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed in it. They will be yours for food." And so if we look to these foods, we can really be a lot healthier. Even culture itself was born with the cultivation of grains. When you could cultivate these grains and store them, then reading and the arts lived with the storage of these grains from one season to the next. And then really, you can see it has the same root, culture and cultivation. really is what gives us civilization, this ability to store grains from one season to the next. The good news, if you look at the Nurses' Health Study, this is a huge study, uh, done mainly from Harvard, where they look at risk of heart disease. And the more whole grains, the lower the risk of heart disease. If we look at stroke risk, we also see that more whole grains, the lower the risk of stroke. If you look at diabetes, more whole grains, you can see about a 40% reduction in the risk of diabetes. But if you eat refined grains, then a 1.6-fold increase in the risk of diabetes. So whole grains actually lower diabetes risk. A lot of this effect comes from fiber because it improves postprandial glucose response, it increases satiety, it lowers caloric density, and lowers overall caloric intake by 10 to 18% for every 14 grams of fiber every day. So to get these whole grains in is just so important. If you don't add a lot of fat to it, super healthy and helps you lose weight, as you have said so often in your book. So diabetes, really, when you talk about diabetes, I could come in here and talk about any organ system you can think of, because diabetes really affects the entire body, whether you're talking the brain, the heart, the eyes, the kidneys, the feet. So basically every system is affected by diabetes. I'm not going to try to explain this slide, but I will just say, really, diabetes is fire in the body. It's a vicious cycle of inflammation that really devastates the body over time. I will say that when you eat sugary foods, high fat foods, and a lot of meat, you are basically putting fuel to the fire and causing more and more and more inflammation. It's a devastating thing. And I think to myself, when I see somebody with uncontrolled diabetes, if they have a diet that includes so much meat and eggs and inflammatory foods like dairy, for example, they are just worsening that inflammation. Whereas if they're eating berries and they're eating whole grains, you can quiet that fire within, and you can help people to go back to normal, quiet that inflammation, and prevent these dreaded complications from diabetes. But the question that was asked is so pertinent. Doesn't a plant-based diet, mean lots of carbs? But these healthy carbs that are shown here are highly inflammatory, anti-inflammatory. They quiet the fire within. They give you healthy energy, and the body can start to act normally. And I'll show you some data that supports that concept. So in terms of if you're eating bananas, you're eating whole grains, you're eating healthy food, your body can handle those carbohydrates. The system works as it should. Insulin levels, are normal, and you can handle it. I'd say it's also important to just exercise is important. I'd say keep trying to maintain a normal weight is so important. And if you can give a diet like you describe in unprocessed, then and people can get to their normal weight. Really, that's the best protection, and the best way to reverse diabetes is by achieving a normal weight. I just want to give one quick formula here for normal weight. If you're wondering, are you normal weight? So for a woman, if you're 5 feet, you get 100 pounds for that. And then for every inch after that, you add 5 pounds. So if you are 5'5", then your ideal weight is 125. If you're a male, then it's 106 pounds for 5 feet, and you get 6 pounds for every inch after that. So if you are, let's just say you're 5'10", then your ideal weight is 172. So that would be 6 times 10 would be 60 plus 6 pounds. I know right around 170 pounds. So there you get, a quick way to calculate weight, ideal weight. So if you're wondering, there you go. For most Americans, that's going to seem like quite a low rate, a low weight. So insulin resistance really comes from lipids. So these lipids come from the diet, people eating fatty foods. And the other place it comes from is from the a fatty a basketball sitting in the belly with all this extra fat, which is basically secreting all these toxins, these lipid subspecies that cause insulin resistance and make it so your body can no longer handle carbohydrates. So what you need to do is get rid of that central obesity and move to a low-fat diet, and it's a great way to reverse diabetes. So this is the study I mentioned earlier in terms of risk of diabetes per, so you can see that processed meat is the absolute worst for risk for diabetes. So people will come in, they say, "Oh my gosh, I have diabetes. I've cut out all the carbs. I'm eating bacon and eggs for for breakfast," and which is about the worst thing they possibly could do because these saturated fats go in and just create the insulin resistance that leads to diabetes. Also, red meat is a high risk food as well. You can see that this is per each daily serving. So a serving of bacon is pretty small. If somebody's having, a big load of bacon every morning, their risk really multiplies. And then you see sugar added beverages. These will have like 40 to 50 grams of sugar in one serving, and these two accelerate the risk for type 2 diabetes. So we have fructose sweetened drinks leading to fatty liver, empty calories, weight gain, lipotoxicity, and insulin resistance. I do want to mention one other thing, like so many people with diabetes are afraid of or have kidney disease. This little cartoon says, "Do you love me?" And it says, "With every fiber of my being." So beans are really an an amazing food when it comes to protecting from progression of kidney disease or preventing it altogether. Even the National Kidney Foundation, which is a very conservative organization, recognizes how a plant-based diet can dramatically reduce the risk of progression of kidney disease. And some of the studies that I've seen show that if you have diabetes, you're worried about kidney disease, that if you move to a plant-based diet, you can reduce the risk of progression by some 40 to 50%, which is better than the medications that we have, simply by eating more plant-based foods. Especially soy is very good, but any kind of bean is helpful, and to get rid of the uh, the animal foods because plant-based foods are lower in dietary acid, lower in phosphate, they lower the uremic toxic production, they lower blood pressure. They reduce inflammation. We have one medication out there for treating kidney disease, which basically what it does is reduce inflammation. We know that when you start to include more plants in your diet, you can dramatically reduce inflammation. You have less hyperfiltration of the kidney. The kidney's not pouring so much fluid through itself. You reduce oxidative stress. You improve endothelial function and glucose control. And your gut also becomes a healthier place, which plays a big role in terms of toxins and that are produced by your gut. So all of these different ways contribute to how a plant-based diet is helpful for preventing kidney disease in people with diabetes. So Leonardo da Vinci, let's turn to him for a second here. He was kind of a rock star of his day, and he was known to basically produce the very best that man could produce. With everything he touched, it was kind of the best of anything. And it turns out he ate a plant-based diet. And we'll come back to him here toward the end of the talk. And then, of course, we have Michelangelo. And I think that, I mean, one way of looking at David is that, your body is really kind of a work of art. And it's very important to respect it and to choose carefully, what you're feeding it. You can't be led by multinational companies that are producing Twinkies and saying, well, because these are available or I saw an ad for these foods, I'm going to eat it. I mean, civilization basically was born again by eating whole grains, beans, brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and so on. So the first book that we put together, again with Jim Joseph, hats off to him. He was traveling to work with Ron Pryor, who was an expert on oxidative stress and finding foods that would reduce oxidative stress in the body. And he found that one of the best foods for reducing what are called ORAC scores were blueberries. So Jim said to himself, he was a neuroscientist at Tufts. They were traveling, commuting into work together. And Jim said to himself, well, he said, he was from West Virginia. He'd say, well, I'm going to feed my rats some of them blueberries and see how they do. And he went ahead and did that and really kind of in some ways changed the world. I mean, we've had so many books come out since this initial book pointing to the health benefits of brightly colored fruits and vegetables. But I would say it started with Jim Joseph and his work as a neuroscientist at Tufts. So the book basically has an introduction. We talk about red foods. We talk about yellow orange foods. We talked about green foods. We talk about blue purple foods. And then we have an eating plan. And then we talk about the truth in black and white. So colors in plants, protect from solar radiation and oxidative damage. So plants basically can't move. They have to sit there in the sun. And this is a very highly damaging place to be, essentially. So what protects them are the phytochemicals that they have that keep them from being burned up by the ultraviolet irradiation. So in the last century, we talked about vitamins and minerals, but now phytonutrients in brightly colored fruits and vegetables really are natural defenders. So if you're thinking health, you need to think color and colorful fruits and vegetables. So plants are living in a sea of ultraviolet light that would kill us all. Enormous free radicals being generated, just like in the brain, actually, because there's so much glucose being poured through the brain. 25% of the energy of the brain of our bodies basically being used up by the brain. So if you think of almost every disease, whether you're talking about cancer or you're talking about heart disease or joints or brain or eye disease, really it's the antioxidants and anti-inflammatory deficiency that's leading to DNA damage, that's leading to oxidized LDL, that's leading to high CRP, that's leading to arthritis, that's leading to brain disease, that's leading to eye disease. And so without color in foods, really, we really have no life. If we're just eating white sugar, if we're eating just Pop-Tarts and Twinkies, we have no color, we have no real pigments, we have no phytonutrients. We really have very little chance for life. On the other hand, if we include a lot of healthy foods that include lycopene, lutein, zeaxanthin, these are the yellow, orange carotenoids, then we can protect ourselves from inflammatory damage. We have in blue foods, the antho means dark blue, cyanos means flower. These are the anthocyanins, and they're found in blueberries and strawberries and plums. And these foods are especially helpful as far as brain protection goes. So here's the structure of anthocyanins, and you have carbon rings connected. You have two connected to one other carbon ring. And these are partially hydrophilic, partially hydrophobic. It's really the perfect chemistry for them to intercalate in cell membranes and to provide an antioxidant effect at the most important site, which is in cell membranes. And so that's why we think blueberries are so highly protective of the brain, is because of these anthocyanins and their structure, which is perfect for quenching antioxidant stress. Red is another important color. Red tends to get our attention. If we see red lipstick, we see a red car, red flower, we tend to look at them. They tend to get our attention. And red things should get our attention, especially red foods, because 7 of 20 of the top antioxidant fruits and vegetables are red. These include strawberries, cranberries, raspberries, cherries, red grapes, beets, and red peppers. So these red foods are really potent antioxidants and have great effects as well. So if you look at the oxygen radical absorbance capacity of foods, and you look at the levels that we have in different foods, uh, you're a lover of kale, and you can see here that kale is number one in the fruits and vegetables. Then you have spinach, Brussels sprouts, and so on. And then in the fresh fruits, you also have blueberries, blackberries, cranberries, strawberries, raspberries as the top five, and others listed here are also very good at quenching these free radicals that basically are why we age. When we have free radicals running around in our body, they'll tend to age our skin, they'll tend to age our bodies, cause damage, lead to cancer by DNA damage. But if you have these free radicals being absorbed, then we can protect our bodies from them. So strawberries, they're thought to be a symbol of love. In France, they're even thought to be an aphrodisiac. They have strawberry soup at weddings, and it's thought that if you split a double strawberry, that you'll fall in love. They have very high ORAC scores, protects from oxidative damage, and they also have other cancer protective agents like allergic acid as well. If you look at strawberries and plasma ORAC, so you may say, okay, well, what if I eat these strawberries? What immediate benefit do I get? Well, you can actually reduce the oxidation that's going on in your bloodstream. If you look at plasma ORAC levels, they go up significantly within 30 and 60 minutes of eating strawberries. So that is a great way to start the day with berries like strawberries or blueberries to increase your own protective capacity of your plasma. And CRP is probably the best predictor of heart disease, even better than total cholesterol over HDL. And having strawberries, this is having 10 strawberries per day for 30 days. You can see that CRP goes from abnormal here in this group to from a 2.8 down to normal below 1 with having 10 strawberries per day. So this can have immediate effects in terms of reducing oxidative stress. And turning now to green colors, this frog will tell you it's not easy being green. Green is really the color that gives all life to Earth. Basically, it's chlorophyll, it's converting CO2 and water to carbohydrates and releases that O2 into the air. So green foods are really packed with phytonutrients. And, when it comes to eating, like you mentioned, potatoes or whole grains and such, when we eat carbohydrates, what we're basically doing is we take those carbohydrates in and then they're broken down by our body back into CO2 and back into water. That's why we're not getting these converted into fat. And making us fat. So carbohydrates, like if you're eating whole foods, they're not converted into fat. They're just basically broken down to CO2 and water, which has no adverse effect on us. We can almost eat as much as we want and really not gain any weight as long as we're eating a low-fat diet. So it goes right back to where it came from, just with our extracting the energy from the carbohydrates. So let's talk about lutein and zeaxanthin here, very high in these green foods here, everything from kale to spinach to broccoli and so on. So this is connected to, the leading cause of blindness in people over age 60 called the age-related macular degeneration. And here we see somebody with normal vision, and then we have somebody with AMD. And unfortunately, in late stage AMD, central vision is lost. So you can't see exactly what you're looking at anymore, as the areas that are the most dependent on vision really are destroyed. So 18 million people age 45 and older suffer from vision loss, and macular degeneration is increased with diabetes. We see much higher risk in those people. It's a leading cause of blindness. There's 14 million people who have it. There's no cure or treatment. And we also have cataracts that are also related to oxidative damage as well. So we know that consumption of lutein in the US is incredibly low. Um, Only about zero point 0.8 milligrams per day. Um, and we really should, it's very easy just to have 1 cup of green leafy vegetables and boom, you're way up in terms of 20 milligrams of lutein, very easily achieved with just minimal amounts of what we would consider minimal amounts of uh, green leafy food. So lutein and zeaxanthin, they concentrate in the back of the eye. And this is where high energy blue light basically hits that area, the macula densa, and can cause damage. The lutein and zeaxanthin protects this area of the eye. It allows for vision, but also protects this area from high energy blue light. So you see that lutein itself basically concentrates and is the absorber of high energy blue light and protects that area of the eye. So lutein that you're getting from green leafy vegetables is the way to protect you from this devastating disease. Lutein intake and AMD risk, if you're getting in about 6 milligrams of lutein per day, which is very easily achieved with consuming green leafy vegetables, you can protect your eye from macular degeneration very effectively with here about a 50% reduction. But you can even do better if you start early and have plenty of protection. So spinach is rich in these yellow-orange carotenoid lutein, one of the main antioxidants for the eye is converted to zeaxanthin. Steve Pratt, who lives here in California, says it's one of the best things you can eat for your eyes. It prevents age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in that super sensitive central area of the retina. So let's turn on to blue foods. So the Great Spirit and the Starberry. The blueberry is a true blue American. It's a Native Americans called them the starberry because they have that five-pointed star in them. They were believed by the Great Spirit to have been sent to preserve them in times of scarcity. They're the undisputed antioxidant champion among fresh fruits and vegetables. And Holly McCord says if you have add one food to your diet this year, make it blueberries. So, and also blueberries, it's interesting, have been associated with reduced risk, even having 2.1 ounces a day, reducing the risk of diabetes by some 40%. We also think that aging and of the nervous system appears to involve a lifetime of insult, which is free radical formation. So protecting from this is so important. If you think of your brain, it's constantly being bombarded by free radicals. It's just churning through so much energy that the energy formation and destruction is basically causing tremendous free radicals to be formed. But anthocyanins are what we use to protect our brains. So some fruits may have 3 or 4 types of anthocyanins, but wild blueberries have as many as 25 to 30, and that this antioxidant power is really coming out of the blue. So we can try to stop. This is basically showing improved cognitive function in rats. I won't go into details here. We're getting a little short on time. So I'll just keep going here. So you can actually reverse motor and cognitive deficits in older animals by feeding them blueberries. And one thing I will mention is that you can actually restore brain function. The human data is coming out now uh, where you're showing neurons, actually, new neurons developing more robustly in people who are eating blueberries. Motor function can also be improved. Uh, the brains are growing more neurons. You're reversing that receptor insensitivity, so the neurons are working better. The brains have fewer damaged proteins when you have the blueberries on board. So wild blueberries, I'm from Maine, so I support the wild blueberries like the Wyman's wild blueberries. They are really highly concentrated. One place that even has more is Alaska. If you ever get a chance, although they're not commercial, in Alaska, the blueberries there have very thick skins and I have just tremendous amounts of anthocyanins when they melt and you pour them out. It's like axle grease. The anthocyanins are just so rich in blueberries grown in that very harsh environment in Alaska. So anthocyanins are susceptible to heat damage. It's best to have the blueberries frozen or fresh. Turmeric's another thing. It's thought that in India, the turmeric that they have in their diet helps to protect them from Alzheimer's. It turns out that Alzheimer's affects less than 1% of the Indian population, and part of this may be from turmeric. Um, it may help with Parkinson's, may help with arthritis, may help with heart disease and stroke, and has been shown to inhibit 22 different types of cancer as well. Green tea, if we're talking about warriors, I mean, back then, the samurai would have their brown rice, they'd have their vegetables, they'd have their soy, but they would also have tea ceremonies where they would have the tea. And the green tea is also a high antioxidant as well, reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease, providing brain protection, protecting from cancer. You really just a teacup every day. Chocolate too. There's some evidence that having chocolate can increased brain activity. I'm just going to show you one slide on that, just showing Nobel laureates per 10 million population chocolate consumption. So you have to have it, like very low sugar, of course, but if you have more chocolate, boom, it seems like you have more Nobel laureates being produced. So God has done the randomized controlled trial. People who eat in this manner, exercise regularly, and avoid tobacco have the least amount of cancer, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, and osteoporosis. So our lives are not in the laps of our gods or even the doctors, but they're really in the lap of our cooks, like our chefs, our cooks. These are the people who guide us and help keep us healthy and strong. So with black and white, we know where we stand. When it comes to nutrition, we often have different fads going around where people are saying, you've got to eat a high protein carnivore diet, and certain people will buy into that. But the truth is that a diet based on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains really allows us to achieve optimal health. So new nutrition kind of offers specific praise for colorful, deeply pigmented, gloriously vibrant fruits and vegetables, and including those as part of your diet. So Leonardo, rock star of his day, remained obstinately and resolutely itself amid a sumptuous carnage of the royal cuisine where he was often invited as a rock star. He preferred to dine on bread, fresh fruit, or chickpea soup, or peas cooked with in almond milk, or simply a green salad. And so this genius that we had really recognized just how important food was and really produced the best that man can produce. So you want to eat abundant fruits and vegetables. I always suggest people try to have berries with breakfast, salad for lunch, plenty of whole grains, beans as protein. It's good to combine different colors. Like if you can combine blueberries and strawberries and raspberries, plus some spinach, plus some spice. Like one thing is just cloves are very, very potent antioxidants. If you go ahead and you add even some pumpkin pie spice or some clove to your smoothie, you can really bounce up the antioxidant benefit of it. Of course, chia, hemp, flax have a lot of omega-3, very helpful. And then, so think of the morning smoothie as your armor against aging, against oxidation, inflammatory diseases that are really ravaging modern civilization, like heart and brain, joint, and eye disease. And you can really make a difference for yourself. So I'm going to stop there um, and leave a few minutes for questions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything you say about whole foods and not being afraid of carbs. I think people confuse carbohydrates like sugar, flour, and alcohol with, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, and beans.
Right. It's very important that you use the term unprocessed like you did, because when people come to me and they say, I'm avoiding carbs, I really have no idea what they're telling me. Are they telling me that they're not eating berries? Or are they telling me that they're not eating processed food? So it's important that we try to help have people define their diets. Is it really a whole foods, healthy diet, or is it something different kind of thing? Because certainly we don't want people avoiding the berries and the grains and the beans kind of thing, because those really should be our fuel and our energy to protect us from the ravages that so many other people are facing.
That's great. Thank you. So, it's amazing because are you familiar with Robbie and Cyrus of Mastering Diabetes?
No, I'm not. No.
So they're two gentlemen that are type 1 diabetics, and they run a wonderful program, and they have a New York Times best-selling book of the same name, Mastering Diabetes. And they're type 1, and they basically eat this diet, and they eat a lot of fruit. And they're on the same page with us as
Okay.
about it's not the sugar that causes the diabetes, but it's the fat.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that caused a lot of insulin resistance and so on for sure. Yeah, yeah. But I do find that even people will say, well, I can't have a smoothie because I have diabetes. But now we have continuous glucose monitors and where people can see what's going on with their blood sugars. And what's remarkable to me is, well, for one thing, berries are actually low in carbs. So if people are looking for some kind of fruit to add to their diet, I always say start with berries. They're so high in antioxidants. They only have about 15 grams of carbohydrate per cup, and they just pack so much nutrition, very nutrient dense. So that's the one I try to get my people with diabetes to start with, and it is a great one because it has so much data regarding helping, to protect the brain and protect the heart, which really is something that people with diabetes face even more than the rest of us, kind of thing.
Is
So the
that
berries, yeah, berries are a good place to start for these people.
is most of your practice dealing with people with diabetes?
A lot of diabetes. I also see a lot of thyroid. A lot of people come in for help with weight loss as well. Um, and so it's always challenging. I must say, so many times I give them the spiel. I show them let me show you my brochure that I give to people. So it is called The Color Cure, and it talks about, brightly colored fruits and vegetables. I really push the berries, the greens, the onions, the vegetables. I have pictures of healthy foods to eat. I mentioned it's a small planet. We have got to be careful how we use its resources and so on. Um, so I try to give them this and I talk with them and try to get them going. And then they'll come back the next time and they'll say, I'm really avoiding carbs. I'm really trying to cut back on my carbs. It's an idea that is so implanted in civilization that in the world that it's it's oftentimes hard to overcome, but eventually we get through to them where they're eating, more berries and more salads. I do think that my patients, and I don't know how you feel, but people who have a big old salad every day for lunch, they often do very well. They do better than the average person if they can get to a big salad every day that just gives them, fills them up, gives them so much healthy food with especially if it's a brightly colored, salad with a variety of different foods in there, and really makes a difference. Yeah.
What food have you noticed is most associated with diabetes?
Oh, for me, without a doubt, I do agree it's processed meat is the worst, absolutely. So people come in, men will come in, they've got the big central obesity, their LDL cholesterol is 200, their total cholesterol is, 280 kind of thing. They have so it's those people that are eating the the red meat and they're the ones to me that are at the highest risk. So I totally agree with the studies from the Harvard School of Public Health that suggest that processed meat is the absolute highest risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Um, without a doubt.
I love the caricature on your handout. It looks just like you.
Oh, this this right.
That's
Yeah,
good.
my nephew somehow did that. He's more clever than I with a computer.
That's really good. So, most guests on the show get this question from the viewers, and you're no exception. What does Dr. Netto eat in a day typically, and what does Dr. Netto do for his exercise?
That's a good question. So yeah, usually I like Ezekiel muffins. I'm impressed with the data on having how a wide variety of fibers really help the body. So I show this to my patients every day. I like the Food for Life seed and grain English muffin. So oftentimes in the morning I don't have tremendous amounts of time, so I'll toast one of those up. And I must say, before last week, I was putting a little bit of peanut butter and then raspberries. So, with the goal of losing weight and with your inspiration, this week I actually I cut out the peanut butter and I lost about 3 pounds just by cutting out the peanut butter. So, what I've been doing this week is one of those toasted English muffins with a pile of fresh raspberries. You got to get the fresh berries in. So that's my typical go-to breakfast. And I must say it's absolutely delicious. I mean, why use raspberry preserves that have sugar and basically have had all of the antioxidant benefit removed from them when you can have fresh, or sometimes if I run out of those, I'll have some frozen backups, frozen raspberries from Trader Joe's in the fridge, in the freezer, and then I'll just thaw them for 1 minute just to take the edge off the cold and use those on the Food for Life Ezekiel. That has 23 different kinds of sprouted seeds and grains in it. And so for me to just have all of that fiber and all of those different types of fiber is so beneficial to the gut. So that's how another option would be to have a blueberry smoothie for breakfast, which I think when I do have a blueberry smoothie, I feel like I leave the house and I'm coated with this antioxidant protection that's going to protect me from living in California and all the pollution, bad air, and things that we have. So it's a great, I think that's another fabulous way to start the day. And I know you like having vegetables for breakfast too. That's another option as well. And then for lunch, I really try to have a big old salad with a lot of different colors in it. I do my best to find one in one of the find them in some of the restaurants around here. And we do have some restaurants that do provide good salads. And then for dinner, I'll try to again have plenty of greens. Usually, I think perhaps a lot like you. I mean, dinner's going to tend to be more of a cooked meal kind of thing with not overcooked greens, and then a lot of and then some protein source, and that may be, some tofu or some beans. I do think that having the whole bean is probably best. And then, of course, like whole grains are also healthy as well. And so it's basically whole grains and veggies and beans for dinner. Uh, and really limiting the oil, especially with your recent inspiration. I sometimes people a common question I get is, well, what about spinach? Can you kind of like use a little bit of heat to kind of? I must say, one time I was in Boston at a bar, and I ordered the spinach, and it came, and it's like the chef had just taken the spinach and just threw it on the hot stove for just a second, took it off, and then served it just lightly cooked. I thought to myself, this is perfect. It's just enough heat to break up the plant cell walls and release the lutein, and then allow me to absorb the lutein. So there is something where if you just use a little bit of heat with something green like that, the lutein is protected, but the it becomes more accessible. And so I think there may be something to just a kiss of heat kind of thing to release the benefits of some green things. And that may be something to try to achieve, with dinner. And it was absolutely delicious, by the way.
Oh, great. Valerie, who was watching live, said that in your slides you talked about fresh blueberries, but how do you feel about frozen blueberries?
No, frozen blueberries are great. Yeah, I must say in California, in almost every supermarket, we have the Wyman's wild blueberries. And really, the wild blueberries do have more anthocyanins. Remember, like with blueberries, the giant blueberries are kind of more white on the inside. They have a very thin skin, and the benefit is really in the skin mainly. And the small blueberries, for one thing, they taste better. Like I actually flew one time with somebody who made pies for a living, and he said, "Yeah, we go to Maine to get the wild blueberries because they have all the flavor." So when they make their blueberry pies, the flavor's coming from the wild blueberries. So they taste better. They have a wider variety of anthocyanins, and you can get 3 pounds of the wild blueberries for about $15 typically, and that's a tremendous. And to have them in the freezer, and oftentimes, for dessert, have a little bowl of wild blueberries that are grown in either Maine or Quebec. That's the only place they're from, but they're available everywhere. They have them, in basically every supermarket. Whole Foods carries them, and they're readily available. So frozen, as you've mentioned in your book, really doesn't do any damage to these phytonutrients, and makes these available year round, and very cost effective as well.
Great, thank you. And Cheryl wants to know, how do you feel about the GLP medications? Are you using them with your patients?
I know you've had other guests on who kind of poo-poo the GLP-1s, but so many people are having, have so much weight to lose. They're struggling. I do see GLP-1s as kind of being a more natural approach to facilitating weight loss. What I often notice when people go on GLP-1s is they no longer are craving heavy foods. Like they couldn't even imagine going out and having a hamburger. Or if they do, they get sick from it. They basically will want to have salad for lunch. They tend to move towards simple, more plant-based foods for one thing, and I encourage them to do that. And then they'll oftentimes stop craving sugar. It kind of helps to retrain the way they're eating and move them towards naturally lower fat, lower calorie foods. There's amazing data coming out that shows like in people on GLP-1s in one day, in some early data, 70% reduction in the risk of Alzheimer's disease, 10 different types of obesity-related cancer being reduced by 40 to 60%. Also, some kidney protection for people with diabetes, some heart protection for people with diabetes. So I'm not averse to the idea of you. I think they are terribly expensive. But, when you look at somebody coming in and they have 200 pounds to lose, I mean, certain people, can do that. But I'm not averse to the idea of using these powerful meds. They are based on proteins and they are based on receptors that are in the body. They're basically a protein that is released from your GI tract when you eat food. And one of the things they do is they go to your brain and say, hey, you just ate, stop eating. But they only last in your system for about 1 to 2 minutes. When you actually take the once a week injection, that stimulation of reducing appetite stays with you for the entire week. And so it helps in a number of ways to reduce glucose, but reduces caloric intake by anywhere from 400 to 1,000 calories per day. And so for people who have, so much weight to lose, it really can help get them towards a path where they feel better, they can exercise more, their sleep apnea goes away, they wake up more energized. I think they are anti-inflammatory partly by helping people lose weight. And with that, the anti-inflammatory effect, oftentimes they'll say, "Wow, I feel so good. I don't have no longer have the joint pain that I had. I just have so much energy compared to where I was before." So I'm an advocate for the GLP-1s for people who need it. Yeah.
Right, thank you. There's another question from a live viewer named what's her name? Okay, I'll find her name in a second, but the question is about what kind of glucose meter do you recommend?
Well, I think the thing to do is to use the continuous glucose monitor now. I mean, we have these available. They're both companies there's one called Stilo, which is the Dexcom version, and also this company, the lead company, has a very tiny one. It's only this big. It sits on your skin and it can give you continuous glucose readout. So if you're really interested in what's going on in your glucose, you can get these without a prescription over the counter. For one of them, you have to go to a website to get them. That's probably the best way to get them. They cost about $50 each if you don't have diabetes. If you do have diabetes, then your insurance will cover. You can get those at, at Costco or CVS or whatever. But I think it's the best. I think the days of pricking your finger and the pain and discomfort and the limited information that gives you is kind of over when you compare it with the continual readout that you get where you can see for 2 weeks exactly what's going on with your blood sugar. So yeah, I think that's the way to go for monitoring glucose now. These are very accurate and very effective.
Thank you. And that was Natalia's question, by the way. And
Mhm.
then there's a question from a different Cheryl. I'm diagnosed with prediabetes. Should I use a glucose meter? I am not on meds and I do not want to be on meds.
Yeah, sure. There's evidence that when you start wearing a sensor, that I'm going to call it a sensor because they are, continuous glucose sensors, that people drop their A1C by about zero point 0.5 to even 1 point. So that means about a 20 to 30 point reduction in their average glucose by knowing what's happening to their glucose. So They can have a certain meal. Let's just say they slip up and have dessert. They say, "Oh my God, my blood sugar went up to 180." So they learn from that, and then they say, "Guess what? I'm going to have blueberries the next time. I'm not going to have, this very high sugar thing, or or they may notice that if they lose a few pounds or start to exercise, with exercise, their blood sugar is better. So it really promotes a healthy lifestyle if they do have prediabetes. So I would encourage them to consider using a sensor to see what's going on with it. And they can learn a lot from that. And it does lower A1C without using medications.
That's great. Well, thank you. This was a wonderful presentation. I wish you every success with the new book. Your other book, I put a link in the show notes, The Color Code. They can already get that right now on
Right.
Amazon. And the new book will be available soon, but they can pre-order it now with the link.
Right. At the colorcurewarrior.com.
Yeah, we have that as well. And where can people find you on social media or in person if they wanted to make an appointment?
Right. Well, my email is dnadeaumd@gmail.com. And I think for now, the best place is you can reach me through the website that I just gave you, the just colorcurewarrior.com. And you can send messages to me. If you want somebody to come out and speak or whatever, be happy to do that. But Chef AJ, just want to thank you for having me on today. You're such a hero to me with all that you've done and your amazing life story. And keep on trucking. You're doing a great job out there.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you next year at the Plantrition Conference again.
You will, absolutely. Thank
Actually,
you.
you know what? I'm coming to Disneyland in January, so maybe I'll see you sooner. Who knows?
I'll be there. I'll be there. We should do a program together. I was thinking
We should do a
all the
program at
metabolic
Disneyland.
research. What's that?
I said we should do a program at Disneyland.
We should, all the metabolic data that supports your idea that carbs can be converted to fat. I think that's waiting to be presented. So
I spoke at the Disneyland Hotel to like 500 physicians that were of a specialty called occupational health doctors.
oh, really?
It was this conference. It was amazing. I didn't get to go to the park, but it was still
Wow.
a great
Wow.
experience. Yeah.
Well, I have a good friend of mine who runs a 900 doctor DO program at Disney World, actually, at Disneyland, at the Disney Hotel. And I'm going to talk to him about you.
Well,
And
tell them I'll be there in January.
we could be there together.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. There's a saying, ask and ye shall receive. And I had mentioned on the show that I just really wanted to go to Disneyland and I got tickets.
All right. All
Yep.
right.
All right. Thanks so much,
Thank you
Dr.
so much.
Nadeau.
You have a great day. Thank
You
you.
too. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ and Friends. Please come back Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time when I'll be featuring Edie Desser of Garden of Edie. And using foods from the garden, she reversed her high blood pressure, and she's going to be making an amazing holiday meal, including an alcohol-free rosé, not